You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. We just got the word, as I mentioned earlier, Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a phone call to U.S. President Donald Trump to talk about the Korean Peninsula situation and bilateral relations. Once again, the two presidents coming from China and the United States talked on the phone on two issues, Korean Peninsula situation and bilateral relations. Earlier, South Korea's top security advisor has announced that Mr. Trump will meet the DPRK leader Kim Jong Un by as early as May. A deal to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula tops the meeting's agenda. South Korean National Security Advisor made the announcement at the White House after briefing Mr. Trump on the South Korean officials' meeting on Monday with Kim. Chung said that DPRK leader is committed to denuclearization. If or when the meeting happens, it's going to be certainly a big step towards the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Where is China in all of this? Where is China in this diplomatic milestone? I asked Mr. Li Baodong in an exclusive interview. Mr. Li is the Vice Minister of China's Foreign Ministry, and it is on the sidelines of the two sessions. Here's the words coming from the Chinese diplomat. What do you make of this latest development?
So we hope that the meeting, can keep the momentum of peace talk, and also that will, make contribution to maintaining peace, stability in this region. Thank you very much.
Many wondered, Vice Minister, just before we go, whether China is going to be still a significant player on the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula. What do you think?
China is, always very active in maintaining peace with stability in this region, because DPRK is our neighbor, and so we have made tremendous contribution to bringing all players together. So I think we are very happy to see that the meeting will take place.
Yeah. But what will be China's role? I mean, leading up to April, for example, during the military exercise, and then for May, maybe there's a meeting taking place.
We'll keep asking them to sit down and to talk with each other, to address their own problems through talks. Thank you.
For more on the summit between Kim Jong Un and Donald Trump, the possible summit, we are joined in our Beijing studio, Mr. Zhao Tong, who is an associate at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Welcome, sir, to our program. Also joining us in Washington, D.C., Jim Walsh, who is a senior research associate of the Security Studies Program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who's been doing research on denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula for a long time. I want to welcome the both of you. A lot of news coming in. I want to brief you a little bit. Earlier, as we said in the program, the two presidents coming from China and the United States already talked on the phone on Friday. They talked about two issues, Korean Peninsula, denuclearization, and the other is bilateral relations. Let me read, it is in Chinese though, the details. I try to translate to the extent that I can. The U.S. President Donald Trump has been saying to the Chinese side, Mr. Zhao, that what Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Chinese side have been saying, which is to resolve the issue between the United States and North Korea through dialogue, is the right idea. He also said the U.S. side really appreciate and also put big emphasis on the role of China when it comes to the issue of the Korean Peninsula, and would love to closely interact and communicate with the Chinese side. Your response to the words coming from the U.S. President?
Well, I'm really amazed by the fact that President Kim Jong Un would give credit to China and to President Xi Jinping himself by pointing out that the insistence by President Xi on dialogue has been the right approach. It's amazing that he could...
This is President Trump, rather.
Right. He could give credit to any other person than himself. So that really tells something. He really believed that this approach of seeking dialogue, starting with some tangible results, is the right approach. So.
On the other hand, Mr. Walsh, of course, the Chinese President Xi Jinping, also very gentleman, he suggested to the U.S. President Donald Trump that the Chinese side really appreciate the active and positive will coming from the U.S. president to peacefully resolve the Korean Peninsula issue through political means. He also iterated that China hopes the United States and North Korea could, as fast as possible, to begin interaction dialogue, to begin that process, and also to strive for a positive outcome. I'm trying to translate right now through the Chinese into English while I'm reading the scripts. So maybe some of those are not necessarily 100% correct when it comes to accuracy, but it is the meaning that we're talking about here. You see a lot of mutual appreciation going on over there, Mr. Walsh.
Yes, and I think this all stems in part from the fact that President Trump is not a policy president. He's not an ideological president. He can pick and choose different positions on different issues, often to the anger of his own party. And what matters to him is personal relationships. And I think going back, and you and I have talked about this, Ian, going back to that first Trump summit with Xi, they established something there that Donald Trump felt positively about China. This is not the first time he said something positive. So I think it's been built on his personal assessment of the Chinese leader. We'll just have to see if that continues. You know, most of the time you need more than that to make policy work. And the president, you know, one thing about living in the U.S., it's never a dull moment. It's always something new, and certainly no one saw this coming.
Of course, the Chinese President Xi Jinping also suggested in the phone call, Mr. Zhao, that the Chinese side believe as long as we are looking at the political solution to the Korean Peninsula issue, the issue will be resolved and moved toward the right direction. He also said this, he hopes all sides would give some positive signs to the other sides so that to avoid anything that could hamper the development of positive signs when it comes to resolve of the Korean Peninsula issue. This is quite sincere, I would say, coming from the Chinese side, because the Chinese side has been working on this for a long, long time, beginning from the very beginning of the six-party talks. So, Mr. Zhao, here's the thing. What role can China still play? I put this question to Mr. Li Baodong earlier, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, but I do want to have your views as well.
Well, I think this statement is, sounds really positive and really important because, in fact, to be honest, there is different view among the Chinese scholarly community. Some people start to fear that maybe China is now kept out of the loop, China is no longer in control, and maybe Chinese interest could be negatively undermined by a direct U.S.-North Korea dialogue. They might have some secret agreement that counters Chinese interests. So a very positive statement from the president, I think, sends a very good signal, saying that China is really being very selfless in doing this. It is really for the benefits of peace and stability.
Right.
As long as dialogue can happen, differences can be resolved, tensions can be lowered, China is willing to play any role, either as a direct player or on the sideline to facilitate the dialogue. So I think that's a very important message.
Over the past 48 hours, this has been very exciting for many of us who've been following this issue for a long time. Mr. Walsh, I would assume the same for you, sir. But having said that, though, for now, Mr. Trump accepting this apparent invitation coming from the North Korean leader, Mr. Kim, to be meeting in May. According to the South Korean sources from the Blue House, it's likely to be in late May. We don't know yet. But the thing is, in preparation for this, will the United States be able to give out some positive signs so that the other side could also follow up suit and interact?
Well, I would hope so, and that's going to require flexibility on all the parties' parts. Let me say that my personal reaction to the news last night was I was simultaneously elated and horrified. To my colleagues' comments that some people will feel, are worried that this sort of summit might lead to the exclusion, of China's point of view, and you all, every time there's this sort of diplomacy, the parties in the region always they want you to have it, they want you to talk, and then when you start talking, they get nervous that they'll get left out. I do not think that's the danger here, and the reason why I am both elated and horrified is that obviously they have to talk at some point.
All right.
Obviously the solution to this is a political settlement, but if they meet and it goes badly, if it crashes and burns, then we can end up in a more dangerous situation than we are today.
But then, Mr. Walsh,
there's high risk and high reward.
But please, Mr. Walsh, do not
Yes.
get pessimistic before we get optimistic about it. Let's make the utmost effort. I mean, finally, this day comes, whether it is really going to bring the real thing. We have to work hard for that. So, Mr. Walsh, here's the thing. What about South Korea and the United States? Obviously, at this point, you can see South Korea very eager to play a middleman role between the U.S. and North Korea. At the same time, as they say, blood is heavier than water. Of course, the North and the South could work in a common goal. That is the peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. The United States, though, probably have other things in mind. For example, its strategic interest, quote unquote, in the region. So, Mr. Walsh, South Korea, the United States, how strong is that partnership?
Well, you know, it's really gone back and forth in real major swings this year. There have been times when it's been very poor. You'll remember President Trump accused President Moon of being an appeaser and, you know, seemed to be cozier with Japan and China than he was, and we don't have an ambassador. The U.S. has no ambassador in South Korea. So those are all negative points, but I must give President Moon a ton of credit here. He has been a very skillful tactician, and even though he, you know, some other politicians might have gotten upset or insulted, he didn't handle it that way. He continued to try to cultivate Mr. Trump, and so I think he's proven himself to be far more skilled than his mentor. And you are right to say, Chen, that the U.S. interests are not exactly the same as South Korean interests, and I think Moon has been very skillful in taking the lead and really pushing for something that he sees as part of South Korea's future. So
how do you see?
That's what brought us to this point.
Okay, Mr. Zhao, how do you see what exactly is U.S. interest in the region when our American guests scratching their head and say, we do not know, it's not clear? What about China's analysis, Mr. Zhao?
Well, I think U.S. has a clear interest in avoiding itself being threatened by a nuclear-capable North Korea. I would disagree with our American colleague in the sense that I don't see any risk, even if the summit meeting failed. Even if the two countries could not resolve their fundamental differences about North Korea's nuclear weapons, they can still achieve some other benefits.
Like what?
Like the U.S. could still use the talks to delay North Korea's further enhancements of its capabilities. Kim Jong Un promised not to continue with nuclear and missile tests as long as dialogue continues. And also they can seek other benefits, including making North Korea to better enforce its previous commitment of nuclear non-proliferation, how to make sure that it would not transport nuclear technologies or materials to any other third player. They can also talk about mutual understandings, what's the ultimate objectives of each other, to avoid basic misunderstandings. So when tensions are high again, the chances of misjudgment could be lower.
On the other hand, Mr. Zhao, I have to ask you about that too, about North Korea, the DPRK. Why is it proposing the meeting now? Why is it so sure that the United States and Washington just would not be able to afford to refuse? Mr. Zhao, how much does it have to do with the fact that the DPRK has already reached certain level when it comes to nuclear weapons and its missile capabilities?
Yes, I think North Korea is now playing this game from a position of strength after already achieving a basic nuclear deterrent capability. So I think North Korea knows that the U.S. has to give diplomacy a shot because all the other options have been explored. I think going forward, as long as the summit meeting takes place, even if there is no concrete results, Kim Jong Un will gain a lot because this meeting will give him a lot of international recognition and legitimacy about its nuclear weapon programs. And I think Kim Jong Un might want to aim to achieve more because he might believe in his own personal chemistry, his own personal capability to talk President Trump into sympathizing with North Korea's nuclear ambition, and therefore making U.S. accept North Korea, keeping its existing capabilities for now, and to work on other small steps like freezing the program in the near-term future.
Okay, that is on the condition that this meeting is going to take place. But whether it's going to take place or not, we do not know. We only know there's an invitation. The other side accepts the invitation. They try to set a time, and nobody knows what's going to happen in between. From now on, a lot of things could happen. Joint military exercise between the United States and South Korea, even though the North Koreans said that they understand it is a routine, but we never know how they're going to react and how the U.S. going to, if manipulated in any way or not. We also do not know whether there are other things related to DPRK that would in a way lead to U.S. Change of attitude, whether for domestic politics or for their real strategic interests. All these are unknown, not to mention other places, Japan, China, Russia, and the others. So, Mr. Walsh, from now until if the meeting happens, what are we talking about here? Briefly, sir.
Well, I think it will happen. I really do believe. I hear your concerns, and we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, but I think the meeting's going to happen. I think, given the timeline, given the fact that the U.S. chief negotiator retired last week, and that we don't have an ambassador in Seoul, then the U.S. has a lot of homework to do to try to work out what its policy is going to be, and then to try to talk to the president and educate him on what the dangers are, what the risks are, and what the opportunities are. So I think there's a lot of work to do between now and May.
All right. Before we go, Mr. Zhao, I also want to throw this question to you. The same thing. What's going to happen? How is China going to react to all kinds of situations? According to Chinese Vice Foreign Minister earlier, that China going to put the people together, let them talk, and let them talk. But here is the thing. China President talking to the U.S. President on the phone, they talk about focus on cooperation. Are we talking about the same thing here, Mr. Zhao? Very briefly.
Yes, I think President Xi said to President Trump that every side should avoid conducting destabilizing activities before the meeting can take place, which means maybe U.S. should consider refraining from conducting any additional unilateral sanctions against North Korea. In terms of the scheduled joint exercises, maybe the United States can scale down some of the most provocative elements of that, such as the decapitation practice against North Korean leaders.
All right.
Those efforts can guarantee that a good summit can take place in time.
Well, a lot of things could be done and should be done. Will they be done? That's the big question mark. But for now, I want to thank the two of you upon this, at least, good news for today. Zhao Tong, Jim Walsh, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. And with that, we're coming to the end of today's program. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight, CGTN, into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and the Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and to everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next week for insights across China and around the world. The weekend is up. Have a great one, everyone.